Welcome to the show. My name is Reed Huberman. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. On the show, I try to provide Christian answers to cultural issues because I believe that the only answer for bad ideas is good ideas, and the greatest ideas are found in Christian scripture. I want to talk to you for a moment about the abolitionist movement and a controversy that was sparked online between Jeff Durbin and Kristan Hawkins of Students for Life, because Jeff Durbin is an abolitionist. I'll get to what that is in a moment, but there was a bill in North Dakota that would absolutely abolish abortion there, but he believes that people like Kristan Hawkins, Students for Life, and other pro-life organizations squashed this bill. Now, what is the bill? The bill in North Dakota was HB 1373, and essentially the bill just does this. It describes a human being also as an unborn child. That would mean this, that if a human being is an unborn child and a human being is murdered in the womb, then it would be a capital crime to perform an abortion. This means that it would be criminalized, I'm assuming for the doctor and for the mother in this case, and potentially the father, if they pursued an abortion of their baby. Now, you should know that in this bill, there's a couple of exceptions. There was an exception for any act performed under the usual and customary standards of medical practice during diagnostic testing. So in other words, if something happened during a test that was an accident, you couldn't be held liable for that. And then secondly, a procedure undertaken to save the life of a mother when accompanied by reasonable steps to save the life of the unborn child. In other words, let's say you have an ectopic pregnancy. Now, you're going to do everything you can to save that baby and the mother, and you put a preference, especially in an ectopic pregnancy, because the baby outside of the fallopian tubes is never going to survive. You'd put an emphasis on the mother who could survive if they get the emergency care that they need. And then, of course, if there's a spontaneous miscarriage, so you need to have a D&C, I believe it is, you would be able to have that in the case of a miscarriage. So let's be really clear that what this bill does is essentially try to provide some honesty with the way in which the abortion conversation has been going on in this country. The way that we get away with it, even though we have a constitution in the 14th Amendment that protects and gives equal protection to all human beings under the law. The way abortionists have gotten away with this is that the Supreme Court defined human beings and humans that deserve protection in a very distinct way. Abortionists in the past have claimed that, of course, the human being in your belly is not actually a human being. It's some other kind of thing, but it's not a person yet. It's a baby, but it's not a person yet. That you don't become a person until maybe like the second trimester or the third trimester, depending upon which state you live in, because of course we know it's just a roll of the dice as to when human life actually begins. So the ridiculous way that this has taken place flies in the face of all objective science, by the way, because every single biologist, for the most part, knows. In fact, 93% of them polled in this NIH poll said that they hold to a conception view of human life, that a new human life is formed at the moment of conception when new DNA is produced. But in order for us to become the abortion wasteland that we are here in America, we've had to redefine what a human being is to exclude unborn babies in the womb. So this bill would undo all of that. We'll get back to the show in just a moment, but today's show is sponsored by our friends over at Sweet and Savory. And Sweet and Savory is an online or in-person cooking experience where you can learn to cook some of the best meals you've ever had in your life. Maybe you missed out on an epic Valentine's Day, or things didn't happen the way you want. The food was cold, the service was bad, which isn't hard to find these days. And you want a great, fun, entertaining experience where you actually have good food. Well, Sweet and Savory Classroom can help you with all that. They can give you online classes if you're not in the classroom area, or you can book your next experience by going to sweetandsavoryclassroom.com. And when you check out, make sure to use the promo code IndieThinker for a discount on your order. Well, Students for Life and other pro-life organizations had a problem with it, and they wrote a letter to those who would be deciding on this bill, and this is what it said. Today we write to you to reaffirm that position in opposition to criminalizing or otherwise punishing women and in opposition to the resolution before the North Dakota Republican Party. While Joe Biden and the Democrats work overtime to ensure that women have only one choice, unlimited, unregulated, taxpayer-funded abortion at every stage of pregnancy, the Republican Party must offer an alternative vision, an America where a culture of life embraced children are welcomed and loved. and women are supported through every stage of pregnancy, no matter the circumstance in which they find themselves. In short, a pro-life America. We ask that you reject the Resolution 6 supporting the concept of implicating women as co-conspirators in their own abortions. The North Dakota Republican Party should instead redouble its efforts to protect women and children through the legislative process and join the pro-life movement, ensuring that women are served and babies are saved. And of course, one of the signers on this letter is Kristan Hawkins, President for Students for Life of America. Now, in this letter, essentially, you get the worldview of the pro-lifer, the person who wants to protect babies in the womb. And their simple idea, it seems in the letter, is that the best way to go about abolishing abortion, which they do want to do, is by protecting the mother and protecting the child. Now, maybe they're saying this for a couple of reasons. First off, they believe that women lack the appropriate mens rea to actually be co-conspirators in their child's death. And what that means essentially is mens rea is the Latin word for guilty mind, that they have been so conditioned by the culture and so conditioned by the abortionist kind of left wing that they don't actually know that they are participating in the murder of an innocent child in their belly. So maybe they're arguing something like that. Maybe they're arguing a kind of feminine-centric focus that we believe that the best way to win our opponents is not with salt, but with honey, and we want to kind of try to win these women who want these abortions and try to educate them rather than to kind of force them into making this decision. So even if we force them to do the right thing, that isn't the best way to do it. We believe that we can, I guess, win them with pro-life arguments. Now, the abolitionist would have something else to say about that, and that's exactly what Jeff Durbin did. Because after this letter was written and this bill did not pass, Jeff Durbin went to social media and he had to say this.
In North Dakota today, we had a bill of abolition and equal protection that went to the floor for a vote. Now, in the past, and many of you guys know that have been following this, the pro-life establishment stops the majority of these bills, the vast majority of these bills, from even getting a hearing. They work behind closed doors. They stop them. They criticize them. They threaten people's careers, and they stop them from even getting to the floor for to a hearing.
Now, I want to be fair really quick and just say this. I am not positive that people like Kristan Hawkins are the reason this bill didn't go through. There may be a factor here, but I'm not sure that that's why this thing didn't pass. Now, I want to suggest something here, that Kristan and Jeff are actually after the same thing. They both want to abolish abortion. They just have a different way of doing it. So what is the abolitionist case for abolishing abortion? Well, Jeff is blaming people like Kristan for keeping this from happening because they believe that the only way to truly get rid of abortion is to criminalize it. So in other words, an abolitionist is a person who believes that abortion should be completely outlawed and made illegal in all circumstances. They argue that abortion is morally wrong and equivalent to murder, and that it should not be considered a medical procedure whatsoever, and that the best way to actually get rid of abortion is to once and for all criminalize abortion. Now, to make the case for Jeff, because I would actually consider myself an abolitionist too, the case is essentially this. What do we do with murder? Right? We're not trying to win the murderer. We're not trying to make rational arguments to bring the murderer over to our side. We're criminalizing murder because we don't have the time, in the midst of all the murdering that murderers do, to try to argue to their better nature. So what we do is we have to criminalize it, right? Now, very few people would also argue in the case of slavery that we should do anything other than criminalize it. We're not trying to win the slave driver over with persuasive arguments and trying to win them over and try to appeal to their reason. We're not interested in doing that because we're not positive that they're really operating on that level. What we want to do, rather, is we want to encourage them by making it completely illegal to do so and to put stiff penalties behind any wrongdoing. And then even if you go as far as what I think is a great modern day example of why Christians and conservatives must fight the culture war, if you look at the transing of children, the only reason that right now we are having such a deep conversation about this and that more and more states around the U.S. are starting to criminalize this act and starting to prohibit it completely is because we have started to legislate against it, and now it has started to change the opinion of people. So this somewhat goes to the idea that you can't legislate morality. Let me first start off by saying you cannot legislate righteousness. You cannot make somebody righteous or good simply because you legislate it in society. You can legislate certain laws, and they may not break those laws simply because they don't want the penalty, but they're not righteous. But what you can do is you can legislate morality. In other words, you can legislate those things which are right and wrong and make a more moral society for everyone. Does it make the individual moral? No, but it does create a moral society that protects people. Therefore, I believe that the answer for slavery, for murder, for transing the kids is the same answer as the one for abortion. If we are truly ever going to see that abortion stops, we are going to have to put a criminal penalty attached to that. And that is the only way that it truly will ever stop. Otherwise, we are not going to reason with the women who have been indoctrinated and committed to ruining the life of the child in their womb. Rather, we are going to have to make sure that they don't have that option. This is why I think abolition is absolutely the cure. We do not argue anymore whether or not we should abolish slavery. And trust me, slavery is evil, but nowhere near as evil as abortion, because abortion is the intentional taking of a human life. So slavery may be bad, but at least it isn't fully intended to make sure that that person is taken away from us, as abortion is. So if in every case we find that criminalization is the way to truly create a better society, then I think we need to also consider it here. But here's my real takeaway from all of this. Unity is difficult, and unity takes work. I actually am kind of opposed to this. I believe that unity should become an organic thing, that you naturally will have unity with the people who are on your same side because you guys believe the same thing. But I actually think that's a pretty naive view. In fact, in Ephesians, the Bible tells us that we must strive to keep a spirit of unity in the bond of peace. See that word strive there? It actually means that unity doesn't happen on accident. It isn't organic. You have to strive and work hard to create unity. And without that working hard, you won't have it. So these two people who are right now at ends with each other and fighting between each other, I believe, need to find a way to work together because they both want the same thing. Jeff Durbin wants to abolish abortion, and Kristan Hawkins wants to abolish abortion, but they are just going about it different ways. This may mean that we can work together, maybe it won't. But I would say working against each other is completely counterproductive. Maybe one last anecdote here about all of this, because one of the things that I've experienced online from Christians, who I think are well-meaning, is a finger wag in my direction because I tend to be a blunt instrument and I tend to kind of just tell the truth as I see it, regardless of feelings, because I happen to believe that old saying from long ago, back in ancient times, facts don't care about your feelings. I happen to believe that truth is good for truth's sake, whether it makes you feel good or not. And therefore, a lot of people don't like that kind of bedside manner or that kind of tone I take with these kind of things, and many Christians will wag their finger. And what I would ask you to consider is whether you like my approach or not, is I would ask you to consider the results. Am I getting the opportunity to engage people who totally disagree with me? Am I stirring up the bee's nest of the atheists online who sit in their echo chamber and don't have to engage with Christians? Am I going outside of the four walls of the church and actually engaging these people with Christian arguments that they have to then therefore take seriously or even respond to whether they like it or not? You may not think it's quote unquote loving very often, but it isn't a matter of whether or not it appeals to your sensibilities. The question is the work getting done? That may be very utilitarian, and I'm not saying that we totally dismiss any concern with tone and bedside manner. All I am saying is just simply this. It is easier to wag our finger at somebody who has a different lane that they're running in than the one that we're running in, just because they don't run like we do. Well, I'm never going to run like you do. I'm going to run like God wants me to run. And if in the process lives are changed, then I think we have to sit back and say, even if the person has a different approach, maybe even if they seem a little bit more rough around the edges than I am, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe God made us all different. Maybe we all have different lanes to run in, and we need to make sure to appreciate all of them, rather than to fight against ourselves, which will only end in self-defeat. Thank you for taking the time to watch that segment of the Indie Thinker podcast. If you enjoyed that, you'll love the full show, and you can find a link for that full show down in the description of this podcast. You can also click somewhere on the screen to access more Indie Thinker content, and you can become a member of Indie Thinker over at indiethinker.org/support, where you can gain exclusive access to ebooks, audiobooks, and movies that will help take your Christian worldview to the next level. But most importantly, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and go with God.